It won't be too long. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Yisrael. This is Yehonatan Dawid with you here again on the, the second week of Black History Month. I have a lot to share with you because I tell you, it's a whole lot to our history, so-called black people. And I might not even get it done in the next couple of weeks. So I might have to spill it over because black history is really true history. Black history is history. And actually, there's no such thing as black history. The only word that I contend with is the name of Yahweh and His Son Yahweh Shua. All other words I will defer to. I do not refer to myself as black. I think when you get it, because we have not been called as such in even the Bible, let alone the Torah. When you call yourself what another person calls you, you have subjected yourself to that person. You have empowered them over you. So yeah, we call ourselves black, but we'll go with that for right now. And we will not debate over that because it does not distract from the name of Yahweh and His Son Yahweh Shua and Ruach HaKodesh. Yahweh for Christians at wordpress.com, Yahweh for Christians at gmail.com, Yehonatan Dawid. You can find my book at Everyone's Place, 1356 West North Avenue. Now, I hope that you can contact me and get the last week's CD on starting this topic of Black History Month. I want to review a little bit. Talked about Noah, which many people will be surprised was not so-called black. He was white. Actually, he was actually white. He was the first soul to be stricken with albinism. Now, being an albino does not mean you're not black. As a matter of fact, you can only be so-called black if you're an albino. And geneticists will not even tell you that. They hate that because it means white people did not come from albinos. As a matter of fact, Noah had locks, just like mine. He was a brother with locks. So he was not a white man, as you would say, but he was stricken with albinism. And anyone who is an albino is black. Hence, he was able to produce Shem, who even the biblical encyclopedia tell you was a brown man. He produced Ham, who the biblical encyclopedias tell you was a black man. And he produced Japhet, who was an albino. Albinism is a recessive gene trait. As such, you cannot be so-called white to even produce it. You have to be black to have it. It's a recessive trait. And we see that Yahweh stroked judgment upon the whole world because the whole world fell in total sin and chaos against him. And only one man was found righteous, and that was Noah. His wife was obedient to him. His 3 sons obedient to him. And in the last few days before entering into the ark, they took wives. So out of the whole earth, only 8 were saved. But only one believed, that was Noah. And from that man's seed, Yahweh repopulated the whole earth that we have today. So we're going to talk about this black history because this is where it restarted from. Adam, we talked about, came from the black ash. He was black. Looking after the image of the one who created him, who was black. And we'll talk about that probably next week, how we know what the Most High looked like. Emphatically, we know. Shem, Ham, and Yafet. Shem's name is actually Shem. Shem is Hebrew for name. Why did Noah name his eldest son Shem? Because he knew as a prophet that this is a prophetic name from whence the salvation of the entire earth would come from. The earth was destroyed and repopulated with his seed. He named his eldest son Shem, which is not a bad word. It means name. Because out of this son will come the one name, the only saving name of you and me and all men. Shem. That is what the eldest son's name was. We call him Shem. Out of Shem came Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, Amram, Eber, Peleg, Terah, Abraham, who is the Ab of many brown nations. Ab, not Abba. Abba is a Greek word. It's the fifth word in the Greek dictionary. Ab means father. It is the first word in the Hebrew dictionary. And Abraham was the father of many Melanic nations. And they hide that from you. Ham was the middle son. Out of Ham came Cush. Out of Cush came Nimrod. But also out of Ham came Mizraim, Canaan. And a lot of people who don't look like me like to talk about Canaan being cursed. Jubilees 10:29 talks about Canaan. Out of Canaan came Egypt, Jordan, and that's who is cursed. It's not that all of Ham was cursed. This is Ham's great-great-grandson. It was Canaan that was cursed for what Ham did in looking at his father's phallus and even manipulating him. And he was awed by it because Ham was black. Ham was dark. He was black. And he was amazed how he could come out of such a white father. Noah was not white as we visualize the so-called white man today. The so-called white man is not white. He's pink. He is the lightest shade of you. White people are not white. They are pink. But Noah was white. And Ham was black. And he did not understand how he could come from that. He caught upon his father while he was asleep in his drunkenness. And he uncovered him. That's what he did. And for that reason, his great-grandson was cursed. Yahweh could not curse Ham. Because what Yahweh blesses, he cannot reverse. He blessed Shem, Ham, and Yafet. So he could not curse Ham. So all black people were not cursed. Just one of the sons. One of the great-grandsons, actually. As such, you come out of Ham, you get Zidon, Chet, Amori, Girgamesh, Hivite, Arki, Semi, Aradi, Zemodi, Kamalthi. You get all these black nations. And the curse of Canaan not being saved into the kingdom has nothing with black peoples not going into heaven, of which nobody's going into heaven anyway. The earth is made for man, not heaven. So get it out of your white minds out there, all you white people, and all you black people who don't study, and all you Mormons who in your own Bible say that black people will not be saved, and now you changing up and trying to go ahead and go knock on our doors. Get off my door. Don't no Mormon ever touch my door. Because it is in your record that people like me will not go into the kingdom. You damned dogs. So no, read your book, study. Black people are not all cursed because of what Ham did. One of his great-grandsons was cursed, and that line, per Zechariah, will not enter into the kingdom. That's only one slice. Then the baby son, Yefet. From the Yefet, you get Gomar, Magog, Maudi, Javan. Now, remember, Yefet was stricken with the same recessive trait of his father. Yefet was an albino. So you're going to get, and remember, it's a recessive trait. That means when he procreates with his melanic wife, most of his children will be melanic. But what your Luciferians tell you is that all the white people went up to Europe and they came from Yefet all around the world. That's not true. You're going to find out the truth before we finish, either today or next week. White people could not have come from Yefet. White people as you know it. Because Yefet was black. He was just an albino. If he was white, he could not have produced Yavan. Yavan is where the Greeks come from. The Greeks were black. Have you seen the archaisms of it? Have you seen the Greeks with the locks? No, you haven't, because you probably have not left the city of Baltimore to go to places where I've been to. If Yefet was white, he could not have produced Tubal, Meshach, Tyre. But he did produce the Ashkenaz, because remember, that trait can't come out. Also from Yefet comes Gomar, Magog. Many people believe, including myself, that Magog is Russia. But Yefet is not the progenitor of white people. He could not have produced Elisha, Tarshish, the Shittim, the Dudavim. He couldn't have done that. But you do have a lot of he did have a higher prevalence of albinism from his genes. That's how come you got the Archon, the Zelo, the Khorazini, Zoran, and Lot, all stricken with albinism. But white people, as the construct that we know it today, did not come from Yefet. Read, study, and learn. So there you have Shem, Ham, Yefet, who are all blessed. Reading Genesis 9:1. So Ham could not have been cursed because he was blessed in Genesis 9:1. Shem was told that he would be the progenitor. He was the one that was blessed to give the knowledge of Yahweh to the whole world. Ham, his line, was cursed to be a servant of his brothers. Not Ham directly, but his line. And they specifically was told that they would have to serve Shem. Yefet was said that he would be enlarged and enter into the tents of Shem. And we know that Shem was scattered throughout the whole world. Canaan would serve Yefet in the tents of Shem. This is what we have today. Because today what you have is Yefet is all over the whole world, served, living in the tents of Shem. So you got the light people and with the brown people, and the black people serving them both. Here in America, we still, and all over the world, there's colorism. Colorism is the disdain of the darker peoples, and we still have it today. We esteem the lighter peoples more highly than the darker people. This is colorism, which is a damned shame. And people who are without color uses this against us. We use it ourselves as a divider that's been put on us. So we still have not gotten to where the so-called white man come from. Because so far, everybody I'm talking about are black peoples. From before the flood to this point of Shem, Ham, and Yafet, we're talking about black peoples. If you read Jubilees, I think you can start back in chapter 5. You will see why did Yahweh destroy the whole world? Because you had the fallen angels who infected mankind. And that's how you got white people. Not pink people, not the white people as you see today. White people, literal white people, and giants. They were giants because these were angels who were white. They had no melanin. So-called white people, European people, have melanin. So when Yahweh destroyed the ancient world, he destroyed it because of the infection of the whole world by white giants, white people who were fallen malachim, fallen angels. They were white as white paper. This is why Lamech thought that his son Noah was one of these when he saw his son come out white, but he was not. So in Jubilees, we've said, and these white giants, these infected ones, they specialize daily in mixing seed, mixing humans with animals, mixing different animals with different animals, mixing insects, plants, life, everything. They specialize in mixing. And from the time of the rising of the sun until it's going down, their whole thoughts were evil, and only Noah was found righteous. This is what we have today. Because Yahshua said, as in the days of Noah, so it will be in this last day. And in this day, as I speak, the elite, the white people that you do not see, the real white people, the Luciferians, are doing the same thing. Mixing seed that should not be mixed and causing a whole nother class of people. And we will get a little bit into that. But we find that in Jubilees, which they took out of the Bible, and for good reason, because it lets you know who is who. But we find that the mixing of blood and different seeds was the high profanity against Yahweh. So much so that he had to destroy the whole earth and start over again. Jubilee 7:26, the demons have begun their reduction against you and against your children. So they did this again. After the flood, they started all over again with the incursion and getting mixed in with man. And this is before the dividing of the earth. See, what Shaitan wants and what he is doing through his seed is not about black and white, so-called black and white, red and yellow and brown and all that stuff. He does not care about races and colors. He does not even care about money and wealth. Those are things that he put down here for us to fight over, to distract us, to keep us unaware of what he is doing over his grand master plan is, and that is to fight against the Most High. What Shaitan wants and what he is orchestrating through his seed, through his white seed, is for your worship. Not your dollars. He don't care about your race. He wants your worship. Think about it. What is more important? If you had all the money that you can think of, you was the richest man on earth, but if you were bedbound because of ill health, what would your money do for you? Couldn't you enjoy life if you were bedbound for the rest of your life? Say you're a 30-year-old multi-trillionaire, but you're bedbound in bed for the rest of your life. What do you care about those trillions? What if you was a trillionaire and you were in prison for the rest of your life? What would it matter? It does not matter. It shows you there's a limit to money. And also your race doesn't matter. If you cannot go out and affect the world, what will give you greater joy and breath of life is having worship. All the world belongs to Shaitan. Yeshua said it himself when he was being tempted. You can have this word, belongs to you. You have infected it all. You won the battle in the Garden of Eden. It's yours. I'll get it later. We're in his world. This is his place. We're just being miserable in it. But right now, all the world is not worshiping him. To be sure, most are. Only a remnant is not. Yehonathan Dawid here. Yahweh for Christians at gmail.com. 443-306-3518. So you have Shem. Shem was allotted the portion of earth that is in the middle of the earth. And this is important because we're getting closer to where we are now. These three brothers had a place to be on this earth. And Shem was allotted the portion in the middle of the earth. In the middle of the earth is where you have so-called Africa. In the book of Jasher, it's called Afria. Because in Afria is the Garden of Eden. And Afria, which many people don't know, most people don't know, includes Saudi Arabia. All of that is holy. I remember decades ago, about 35, 37 years ago, a man in Yah told me this. And most people are thinking that, now this man is a prophet. He told me that all of so-called Africa was holy, and that it includes Saudi Arabia, with Robert Lefalian Johnson. And I've never heard that before. We're thinking about Israel. Is it real? Is Israel really the Holy Land? I tell you, that to me, that's still up in the air. That's a whole nother vein of study. But the point is, Shem is not confined to such a small space in respects to the whole earth. Because if you read the book of Jasher, you'll see that he had large, spacious land. Large, spacious land. And it was huge. It covered a huge land mass. From Eden all the way to Mount Zion, past the Reed Sea, Lebanon, Bashan, Babel, India, Ararat. Matter of fact, Jasher says the land was spacious and very good. That little land that's the size of New Jersey is not spacious and is not very good. And as an aside, if you read about all the vegetation, the trees, the animals, the water masses, they are not found in so-called Israel. The birds that are listed in the Bible, that are in the Holy Land, the animals, they are all in the heart of Africa. They're not in Israel. So Shem was not limited to that small area. He had the Rapha Mountains, which is at the northern limit. His land was a temperate land. It was not very hot, was not very cold. It was temperate. That's the land he was given. Very goodly, very large and spacious, as a quote from Jasher. Ham got the second portion. Now, when you read the division of the sons and where the lands they were taken, they, of course, touched one another. But it was in a circle. If you look at the borders and limits of them, you can put it like a bullseye on the wall. Put a dot in the center. That's Shem. Then draw a circle around that dot. That's Ham. Then draw another circle around that, and that's Yafet. That's how it was situated. So Shem was supposed to be, it's not ended up happening, supposed to be surrounded by his brother Ham. Ham got the second portion. And he was the ring of fire. The mountains of fire was the southern limit. Turkey, Iran, India, Australia, South America. So Ham had the hot areas. Hence his name. black and hot. And Yafet was outside of that. China, Russia, North America, Antarctica, Alaska. There's not really a South Pole and North Pole. That's the lies of globalism. But he was to circle his brother Ham. He had the cold climates. If you read from Jasher 9:14, it says, bound them all by an oath, imprecating a curse on everyone who sought to seize the portion not fallen to him by his lot. Amen. Amen. When you say amen, you're saying amen to a curse if it's not followed to the letter. And they say amen to that. These three brothers vowed till the end of judgment, it says, to the day of judgment, that they would not cross the borders to their brother's land. Immediately, Ham's seed violated that. Shem never took over his whole land, and Yafet took a long time before going to where he was supposed to go, and actually never really totally left either. Yahweh had kind of a difficult time getting man to spread out. One of the chief ways he did that was by a series of famines. Famine after famine after famine was utilized by Yahweh to start pushing man away from the epicenter of Shem and the ark. And this eventually pushed man out. But they were not wanting to leave. Everybody wanted to stay right there in that goodly land of Shem, particularly Ham, who immediately took over part of the land to a curse. His own grandfather said, listen, you shouldn't do this because you're going to be cursed for doing this. This is not your portion. He even told him that. He ignored it. This is why I despise people who don't know what they're talking about, who like to claim that the colonials had right to come in here and eviscerate this land of its people, the native, what they call the native Indians. Because they said Israel did it when they came out of Egypt. No. Two different scenarios totally. Yisrael was taking land from squatters in their land. It was their land already. They were ridding it of squatters from the lineage of Ham, Canaanites, Philistines, who were squatting in their land. They had all rights to destroy. And not only that, Yisrael was not totally against anyone in their land. If they wanted to co-opt in their belief, they had every right to. They would be received by the Israelites. But of course, they didn't want to do that. They fought them. This is not what happened in colonialism in the racist Atlantic slave trade. They did not come over here and copy what happened in Israel. What they did was colonialism and racism and white supremacy. That's what that was. Yisrael, when they came out of Mizraim, the house of bondage, they were reclaiming what was theirs from the beginning that was promised to Abraham by Yahshua himself, face to face. Know your history. Like I said, there's no such thing as black history. It's just history. Just so happens that everybody was so-called black until we get down to the part I haven't told you about yet. So we have Ham, who had the dark climates, and Yafet, who had the colder climates. Now, they made this vow not to cross over into one another's land, to the point of being cursed if they did so. As such, you have the wars you have now, the fighting you have now, the bad history that you have now, by dark peoples, fighting dark peoples. Remember, Shem, Ham, and Yafet are all various shades of so-called black peoples. To this very day as I speak, we are our worst enemies. We are fighting each other. And we're doing the work of our enemies for him. And we need to not do this. We need to love our neighbor as ourselves. Your neighbor does not look, your neighbor looks like you. And your enemies and your suppressors do not. And we're doing their work for them when we're gunning ourselves, each other, our brothers, down in the streets. But what it is Shem fighting Ham, Ham fighting Shem, Ham fighting Yafet, Yafet fighting Shem, brothers fighting against brothers of various different hues of melanin. Jubilees 10:1 says, demons lead sons astray again. As it was before the flood, it followed after the flood. The demons led the sons astray. You know, my research is I come to a conclusion that I have not seen anywhere else. I tend to do that. And I start off on a topic and I do not have fear on what the truth is going to be. And a lot of times I end up coming to a conclusion that I've not seen anywhere else and the others do not agree to. One of them is this, is that my reading, my research in Jubilees and Jasher and in the good old Bible itself, and with prayer and fasting, that I don't know if all of so-called Europe had any listing of portions to any of the sons. Certainly Shem was not a portion so-called Europe. Certainly Ham was not. And they say Yafet was. But I don't really think that's true. At least not the whole portion of it. A portion of that was left alone. Because remember, Shaitan has to have his portion. And for what I'm seeing, Europe was his portion. Think about it. And you have on the west of Europe, you have two seas. You have the Black Sea, you have the Caspian Sea. The Caspian Sea is west of the Caspian Sea. The Caspian Sea to the Russia side, and the Black Sea to the Great Britain and England side. And I'm going to say some more about that next week. I'll leave that alone for right now. But I will say this today. That's where your fallen angels landed. That's where Shaitan, his seed, landed when Yahshua threw them and his Malachim threw them out of Hashemayim. They landed in the Black Sea and they landed in the Caspian Sea. Look in your map and you see where they are. Chapter 13 tells us about Abram going to Canaan. This is the land that was promised to Shem's seed. During that time, Nimrod was out there fighting with Chedorlaomer, fighting black man. But everybody stayed close to that tower, even after it was torn down. Everybody stayed right around that area, and it could only be pushed out with famine. Yahweh had to intervene to get them away from Shem's land. In the meantime, though, they're mixing. And that's where you get the problem is. But us as a so-called black people keep connecting ourselves only to Egypt instead of to Hebraism. We were not all kings. We did not come from Egypt. We have a deep history with Egypt. But stop connecting yourself as a promise to Egypt. Connect yourselves to Abraham, the father of many brown nations, the Eberite who crossed over, Hebrew. The beginning of modern Egypt, if you want to call it that, which is really Syriad, and Syriad became Mizraim. Mizraim is the house of bondage. But the first pharaoh was Rikayon. Rikayon was not even Egyptian. He came in Egypt hungry and poor, but was very beautiful and smart. Hired 30 strong rebels or they call them rabbles, but still the same thing. And he took over a sepulchre, and they demanded that anybody who wanted to be buried there had to pay 200 pieces of silver. This is unheard of. Had to pay to be buried? This was unheard of anywhere on the whole earth. When the king found out about this, he only showed up to the people once a year. He was angry, but the wise words of Rikayon soothed him, and he saw how wise this was. So Osiris, who was the king of Egypt, changed the name of Rikayon to Pharaoh because he exacted tax from the dead. Very smart. Taxing the dead, which the whole world does now to this day. So there's your beginning of Egypt and the Pharaoh, and there's others deep. It's very deep. It goes to the first pyramid being made and what it symbolizes and how the meaning of it for the entire earth. The numbers of it, the mathematica of it, the gematria of it is astounding. And I will not aside to it today. But Yahweh used famines to separate the peoples, to get them to where they needed to be, for the completion of his revelation, for the salvation of man. He wanted Shem in the heart of the earth for a reason, because from there will he reveal his plan. Abram is our father. He was the original internet. When he did his travels, he's the one that used the letters of Yahweh, Yod, He, Wah, and interjected it into the current writings of the world at that time, which was picture writing. There was no letters per se in the ancient world at that time. You had picture writing, pictographic letters. What Abraham did was he used that with the characters of Yahweh's name and made them vowels. He's the beginning of the use of vowels. Before that, there was no use of vowels in transmitting written language. Abraham started that. And the whole world was able to communicate better. Before, it was like an esoteric way of communicating. Only a small group of people understood in writing what was being said from one nation to another, until Abraham came about and went about all the land and all his travels. You can look at maps on his travels, and he made it understandable for the common people, which increased trade and also helped him get wealthy. Abraham became quite wealthy as he went throughout the lands because of his use of language and his advancement of written language, which he used with the name of Yahweh. This is something you cannot know by just looking at TV all day long, not spending time in fasting and prayer and true reading and true studying, instead of being a thumb scholar with your smartphone, which makes you dumber and dumber. But in Abraham's time, the city of Shalom already existed. That's why he paid tithes to Melchizedek, who was a king of Shalom. It was already known, the town, but it took thousands of years before we get to King David, who actually started building the city of David in the promised land. This is something that took over a process of centuries. And even to this day, so-called Africa was never fully taken over by Shem. The height of your so-called black pride is Shlomo, who you call Solomon. The whole world acknowledged Solomon for who he was, as the harbinger of truth to all man. This was the only time that the world acknowledged the Hebrew man as having the truth. And they all went to him, all about the world, for wisdom. What Solomon was supposed to do was to destroy all these nations, or they were supposed to co-opt in the knowledge of Yahweh. They did not. They took their knowledge that he gave them and took it back to their countries and mixed it with their own faith. And Solomon increased himself with wives and concubines as obtaining peace to these nations instead of warring with them as his father did. David didn't play. He hated the Philistines, the Canaanites, and all his brown cousins all about him. He killed them, destroyed them, and beat them as dust before the wind. Threw their children against the rock, chopped off the heads of the giants, lined them up, made them lay down in the ground, lined them up, measured them. If there was over a certain height, he had their heads chopped off. David didn't play. He loved those who loved Yahweh. He hated those who hated Yahweh with a perfect hatred. His son Shlomo went on to have sex with all of them and got everybody together that way. It didn't work after he died. And then he did another thing he shouldn't have done. He sent a contingent of Hebrews up to where we are now in so-called America. And it came to haunt them later when those ships came on like Apocalypto. The original people here was sent here by Shlomo. Hebrews, your brothers. Yahweh didn't tell them to come up here. Shlomo did that. And they paid for it. We are not supposed to go to lands that are not allotted to us. That was an oath from the coming out of the ark. It has been broken by all three brothers. And we paid for it over here. When those colonials came off those boats, off those ships, Abraham had 9 sons. At least, probably even more than that. But we know he had the son of Hagar, that's the Ishmaelites. And of course, the chosen son from Sarah. But remember, he had the Midianite Keturah, of which he had 7 sons, and dispersed them out to the land, gave them wealth, and dispersed them out. But he also had concubines from Arabia. So these people end up being your enemies and also co-opted with the so-called white man in your slavery. But the line of the Messiah actually does not come through the man, not the man's seed. Remember in the garden, Yahweh said, Mother Hawa's seed will crush the serpent's seed, not Adam's seed. Rebecca, Leah, Rachel, they all came from Mesopotamia. But remember, we have a rich history with Mizraim, because Bilhah and Zilpah were Egyptian. Manasseh and Ephraim were Egyptian. So we have a whole lot of Hebrew Israelites with Egyptian blood who are mixed. The color of man is very complex. I'm going to try to finish this up if I can next week.
I'm fine. Is that you want to call?
And there's so much to share before we haven't even gotten to the white man hasn't even entered your history yet. He hasn't even come into it yet. Not to the vast numbers that he's in now. But all of this black history, so-called black history, is actual history of your peoples. And we will continue. I think I got a couple more weeks to finish this. And we will do this. It's Yahweh for Christians at wordpress.com 443-306-358. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Yisrael.